Can you hear me? So we got charts that I'll send you, obviously, that we can just layer over. Ladies and gentlemen, Jay McInnes, Sharp Real Estate Group, episode 280, this week in Vancouver real estate. We're gonna start off a little differently. You may notice something different from the last video. I've been vandalized personally. No one's fessed up yet, but I know it was done deliberately. So we got some random events. I was doing some searching on some things last night, found some random events and things that have taken place. So we're gonna give this first minute of that sort of attention. I thought it was interesting that as of 2024, China has approximately 1,142 active coal power plants. So Al, when you're recycling that can after you're finished drinking with it and paying those carbon taxes, just know it's doing nothing for the world. That was really reassuring. And then also, of course, in a climate of housing affordability issues and availability issues and everything that we're getting thrown at here, I found it also interesting that as of 2024, estimates on the number of vacant homes in China, again, range widely with figures between 65 million and 80 million vacant homes, creating what they often refer to as ghost cities. Very interesting, the contrasts between said two nations. That's our offshore random events. Our onshore random events, the federal government has officially requested to raise the debt ceiling. So we have all heard of the US gonna raise the debt ceiling. If they don't let us raise the debt ceiling, government's gonna shut down and the whole thing's gonna crumble, blah, blah, blah. And of course, every single time they raise it, federal government have requested to raise the debt ceiling by $295 billion here in Canada. So the current ceiling is at 1.831 trillion, it's a T, proposing to boost that to 2.126 trillion. Why not? Federal budget, as we discussed the last week, some highlights from that. The fiscal year 2024-2025, Canada intends to borrow debt creation, $508 billion, with 83% of that going towards refinancing maturing debt. So let's get a credit card, pay off another credit card, and it works beautifully when us chumps are paying our taxes on time. Anyway, enough of that, which actually ties into, funnily enough, Al, I'm currently reading a book, When Money Dies, the nightmare of deficit spending, devaluation, and hyperinflation in Weimar Germany. And we're seeing some parallels here. Al, I highly recommend the book. It'll give you insight into what they're doing at the top, doing to us at the top. So today we're gonna start with rates. Chart number 1 is the 3 to 5 year Canadian bond yield chart. So as we briefly discussed before, there's a lot of attention being given to the variable rate. Bank of Canada speaking, currently at 5%. I think for the 6th time holding, there's a lot of speculation on is our rates gonna come? Rates, let's see what our rate's gonna come down this year. It's our variable rate's gonna come down this year. So your variable rate mortgages, your lines of credit, your construction loans, your home equity lines, all this sort of stuff. So our rate's gonna come down. So that's, again, the variable rate. The fixed rate, as we discussed, and you'll see in this chart, is based on Canadian bond yields. So this is an open market. As you can see in this chart, we're up almost 75 basis points in 2024 so far. So ebbs and flows, but the trajectory is, of course, up and to the right. So that's what fixed rates are on. And before, just to get into it here, before all this craziness, you would be getting variable rates at a lower price or percentage or interest rate than you were fixed. Now that has reversed. So the fixed rate is now the baseline of mortgage money in the country. Of course, they each have different prerequisites that are going to be mandatory to hit depending on which one you choose. But this is the chart that you've got to look for those fixed rates, and the Bank of Canada meetings are of course for the variable rates. So this is a lot less commonly discussed. And what we're looking at right now, spoke to a client this week looking to refinance on their property, and they were from the big banks, RBC specifically. They were offered 5-year fixed rate at 4.99. And a 3-year fixed, which is, I believe, from what I'm hearing, the most common right now. Of course, there's anticipation that rates are going to go down, so people are taking that tighter timeline of 3 years. 3-year fixed at 5.4. Typical, speaking to a couple of brokers this week as well, typical 5-year variable, you're looking at about 6.19. So quite a bit higher. That's following the chart we've just shown. And of course, those variable rate forecasts are that they are going to start coming down in June, and maybe 2 or 3 times this year. Who knows, maybe a quarter point at a time, blah, blah, blah. I'm still gonna hold the contrarian view that we're not gonna get variable rate decreases in 2024. I have been wrong on this before, which I'm constantly reminded of, but that's what I'm gonna go with for the record here today, Wednesday, May 1st. So what else is happening in the market? Housing starts. We've heard a lot about housing starts and the lack of building that's taken place. Done a little digging now. The Rennie Landscape, Spring 2024 edition, very interesting read. They've got on site, on deck, on payroll, whatever you want to call it, economists over there, which do a really good job and are quoted regularly. So I decided to dive into that this year amongst a couple of articles which were focusing on this. So just to get some reality, we're looking at housing starts from last year, year 2023. Progress has been made with the provincial total nearing 48,000 housing starts last year, which is 11% more than the previous high. Looking at where those starts occurred, the lion's share, 69%, were actually in Metro Vancouver, with more than 33,000 homes starting last year, 18% more than the previous high back in 2019. Basically what we're looking at here, not completion, so how many homes are obviously hitting the market, but starts, so how many homes have begun construction. Most of those homes that began construction last year in Metro Vancouver were multifamily projects, so of course, towers, townhomes, so on and so forth, high-rise, low-rise, mid-rise, that would have been planned, financed, approved, and in this case, in the cases of condo projects, largely sold several years ago in a totally different environment. So as we see these starts kick off, as they're stating, let's say it takes 4 years to build a tower, or the process of getting a tower built, they will pre-sell, and then you'll have, let's say, 2 to 3 years of actual construction. This is post probably 2 years of fighting the bureaucracy of City Hall to get to the point of being able to pre-sell, which they obviously need to hit triggers for and able to get their financing to build with, yada, yada, yada. So the starts last year were very strong. As we go in here, before I continue that, I'll just go into the next chart here, which is housing starts 2023 compared to the 10-year average. As you can see here, we're 34% up in Vancouver compared to the 10-year, and then January 2024 starts are already 44% down from January 2023 starts, as you will see in this third chart here. So basically what we're doing is, because those processes were already underway from, again, a different market and have finally started to build, that's great because we're going to get those products sooner. But in the current market, at the current rates, that things are very slowed down, we're gonna, in a couple of years, see that gap in the inventory coming on the market because there's a lot less taking place right now. So that leads us into a Province article that came out last week, Tale of One City, Vancouver housing industry is both booming and struggling. Even CMHC's most optimistic forecast, depending on factors such as interest rates and how recent and future government policies affect conditions, showing Metro Vancouver's housing starts dropping by 5% this year, followed by a rebound next year. CMHC's most pessimistic outlook for Metro Vancouver housing starts could be a decrease of 22%, and then declining of this year, declining even lower by 2026. So because of the high interest rate, and this is seeing in the land department, so vacant land being held by developers, we're seeing a lot of that offloaded. We're seeing foreclosures and pauses, which we'll get into in a little bit, of projects taking place. Just getting ready to get to that selling position. So there's a lot of movement at the high end of projects that have been canceled and what's happening with those lots of land, so on and so forth. So as we're in the cluster now, based on the rate environment, having been here now for over 2 years, the environment is dramatically different. So that's going to put that future gap in the market. As just stated, Bo Jarvis, president of West Group Properties, obviously very big, predominant developer in the game here in Vancouver, keeps a running list of Vancouver development sites, foreclosures, court order sales, and receiverships, which he estimates could total 7,000 homes across dozens of different projects in the last count. Jarvis also tallied another 3,000 or so homes in several Metro Vancouver residential projects that have been put on hold, some of them by very established developers such as himself. So there's a lot of top end, we'll call it reshuffling, taking place. How instead of moving forward and selling projects and getting the steps taken place to get these projects underway and built, there's a lot of shuffling taking place and sites on hold, pause, being foreclosed. So all of this wait time again is creating the gap. And another little tidbit here, we see a lot of get the government involved, which they of course have been with a variety of different things. But always remember, BC, like the rest of Canada, relies on private sectors to build the majority of the housing. Social housing is less than 5% of BC's housing stock. So social housing, of course, being government subsidized, owned, or operated. So these big bad developers who are always get the short end of the stick from public perception that are making things more expensive and they are the bulk of where all of this inventory comes from. So we definitely need them, and if you are of the narrative that we need more homes to satisfactorily squelch end this housing crisis that we're in, we need those guys. And we need them working and creating as fluidly as possible. So some anecdotal details on that. I was speaking last week to a home designer, who's done a lot of work over the last couple decades in single family detached, then in a lot of half duplex sections. And now he's just gone out on his own and he's getting hired by a lot of these multiplex builders now. So if you may recall, single family to oversized lots, you can now fit 3, 4, 5, 6, up to 8 units, depending on the size of the lot, with no parking mandatory on the lot as a part of this density plan that is taking place in Vancouver that has ruled out all single family zoning, and you can now do this multifamily. So they did an initial 100 permits from City Hall to kind of test this. All 100 permits are done. He was telling me they've all been put through and they are sprinkled completely around the entire city, deep west side to deep east side. So you're gonna have a huge influx, but a huge variety of what you're gonna see in these finished products, of course, from high end to, I don't want to say low end because everything is so expensive, but you know what I mean. There's going to be a scale there on all sets of land values there. So that is going to be driving, and there's obviously an appetite for that still with those more, we'll call them mom and pop developers that are doing these small things. And what he was saying, some of them are doing them just to sell. Some of them are doing them kind of as legacy projects. Grandma's gonna live in one, kids are gonna live in another, they'll sell another one off, rent another one out. So it's just giving these more options. So that is definitely something that has gotten a lot of attention right away. But on the higher end, more developments, bigger towers, all that sort of stuff. Even with a lot of the density for the transit stuff that's coming, there's a lot of burning of time, which is again gonna keep that gap in the future. Now, Quickly tied to that, CACs, which we talked about a couple months ago, community amenity contributions. Community amenity contributions will no longer be negotiated on a case-by-case basis. So might the extortion of these developers from the city of Vancouver and so forth actually be coming to an end? I think the word was quelch that I was looking for. We all know, hi, I'm a developer, Mr. Sim, Mr. City of Vancouver. I want to build something. Well, we want to build a few things, so give us some money because we've squandered the rest of the tax dollars. So instead of amenity cost contributions, will be made clear and upfront in the planning process. Let's get a little bit more democratic with that, shall we? All municipalities will have more flexibility in where they allocate development costs, charges, and can now use them to fund new and improved municipal facilities like fire halls, police stations, and others. That others will be very interesting. So they can use it for anything, but they're now going to be made clear up front. More BS. City is completely dysfunctional in their spending, so they need to get it from somewhere else. So of course, let's layer it onto new homeowners. They'll pay it gladly. Now, next article, going back just to re-clarify this CAC's debacle. If we remember back in October 2023, Metro Vancouver needs billions for infrastructure. Who should pay? This is an article that we dove quite deep on into the costs and how and why and where. You can look back to look at that if you care to. Metro Vancouver is proposing to shield existing homeowners from bigger property tax hikes by shifting the burden of growth-related infrastructure spending to new construction. So again, our focus on that was they say they're trying to make homes cheaper, yet they're layering taxes now onto the developer at the back end because no one talks about that. Those closed-door conversations before, the a la carte bill that the city would extort developers with wasn't public knowledge. Now, there's apparently going to be some clarity on that, but of course, the city is trying to get their money, and they're always going to tap into ye old real estate market because apparently that's where all the money just flows freely. People who plan cities will tell you that most taxpayers don't usually think about their sewage and water unless their taps are undrinkable or their toilets don't work or they get a huge tax bill. Well, of course, because we pay large property tax bills, which should cover that. Metro Vancouver needs $35 billion in capital expenses related to water, liquid waste, and parks over the next 30 years, just over $1 billion a year, with $11.5 billion of that designated to being connected to growth. So the growing workload, the growing sewage that's going into the lines, the growing taps with all these homes, obviously the system needs to expand. There's no easy way to raise many billions. The debate now is how the burden should be shared between existing homeowners and taxes or on new construction. Metro's fee adjustments would vary depending on development type and location based on huge increases across the board to as much as a 255% increase. I thought we were supposed to make homes cheaper for the people. If the new fee structure is adopted, the DCCs, the development cost, blah, 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 I can't remember, for the townhomes, depending on location, would be more than triple over the next 3 years from $8,600 to $30,000. DCCs on a purpose-built rental would be tripled from $6,200 per unit to $20,900 per unit, all in taxes. So with that, I had to do another little dig. For the fiscal year of 23-24, the BC fiscal budget forecasted total revenues from all sources of taxation at approximately $77.7 billion just here in ye old BC. That figure represents a $1.4 billion increase from earlier projections in the year. I don't know if that's another billion for carbon tax. Carbon tax obviously is broken up federally. Who the hell knows? But again, to splash Metro Vancouver needs billions for infrastructure, who should pay? And to layer that into new construction, which when they've already got a pot of 77 billion, they only need $1 billion a year. I don't think they need to add 20,000 per townhome and 30,000 per unit in additional taxes. It's just a cluster F of ridiculousness. Al, time. Well, we're just on time. 20 is the new 5-minute little jaunt in videos. So that's it. That's what we have this week in Vancouver real estate. As interesting or as boring as it may be, the money's still expensive. We do have housing starts. There's gonna be a gap. They are still making real estate more expensive with new taxation. And that is what we've got this week. I will see you. You're off next week, so we can't even do next week. In 14 days.